In part 3, we're going to now throw in some factoring problems with these. So here's our question. We want to find out what can x be in this trig equation. So you can solve it by undoing. We've been doing that already, but I want to factor it instead. So the cosine squared of x minus 1 equals 0. We can factor that using the difference of two squares. I'm going to split up that cosine squared of x into the cosine of x and the cosine of x. Then you can split up that negative 1 into a negative 1 and a positive 1. Now I have this factored. So I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve for x. So on this first factor, the cosine of x minus 1 equals 0. Solve for x, cosine of x, so you add 1. And then x equals the cosine inverse of 1. And then we're going to use our unit circle. So we're looking at the cosine. When is the cosine? I'm going to give you a 1. And the only place is right here at 0 degrees. So there's our first solution to this equation. Now we'll go to the second factor. Cosine of x plus 1 equals 0. Cosine of x equals negative 1. Then cosine inverse of negative 1. Where do you see a negative 1 for your x? Right there. So that angle is pi, or 180 degrees. Second question here, we want to factor it. This one's a little more challenging of a factoring problem. We want to solve it from 0 to 2 pi. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put it in standard form, from the highest term, the highest degree, down to the lowest term. So we're pushing this 3 sine squared of x over to the left. So now we have 2 sine cubed minus 3 sine squared of x plus the sine of x equals 0. All right, we have now put it in standard form. We want to factor it. The number one rule to factoring is taking out your greatest common factor. So what is the greatest common factor of these three terms? Well, it is the sine of x. So we've taken out the sine of x. Now we're left with a quadratic equation. Now, if you're comfortable with having that sine squared of x in there, that's fine. They do teach this thing called substitution. What you do is you just take out the sine of x and replace it with the letter u. And if you have a sine squared of x, you replace it with u squared. So you're a little bit more comfortable with factoring. So this would be a u squared, and this piece right here would be a u. So you're factoring with u's instead of the trig piece. So it looks like that. 2u squared minus 3u plus 1. Now we've already taught you the AC method of factoring. So the AC method, what are the factors of AC that add to the middle term b, and then you convert that to a 4-term grouping. All right, so let's say we've done that now. We split it up as 2u minus 1 and then u minus 1. Now all you do is just take those signs of x's and replace them back in for your u. So now I have my equation completely factorized. I have 3 factors. I have that GCF of sine of x, and then I have 2 sine of x minus 1, and then I have my sine of x minus 1. Now we'll set each of those factors equal to 0 and solve for x. All right. So in the first equation, the sine of x equals 0. So we want to find out when would we get a 0 on our unit circle for y. So let's head down to our unit circle. And we want to find out when do we have a 0 for y. So here's our y value of 0. It's at 0 radians, or here's another 0 at pi. So we have two answers, 0 radians and pi radians. All right. Now let's move on to the purple equation. And that factor of 2 sine of x minus 1, we want to undo it. So we're going to add a 1 to both sides, and then we'll divide both sides by a 2. So we have the sine of x equaling 1/2. So x equals the sine inverse of 1/2. So we look at our unit circle. We're looking at the y values. Here's a y value of 1/2, so that angle is pi over 6. Or see if you can find the other one. Here's your other one, over here, of 5 pi over 6. We have two answers, pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. All right, last equation over here in the green. Solve by undoing, so we'll add 1 to both sides. X equals the sine inverse of 1. Looking at the y values, there's only one of them. Right here, the angle is pi over 2. So you have a total of 5 answers for x from the constraint 0 to 2 pi. Our last example in here is a tangent equation. Let's do this one together. So we're going to first convert this to standard form. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. Then either you can use that u substitution if you want. So you'd say u equals the tangent of x, and then you replace it as u squared minus u minus 3. In this case, we get to use the t-chart. So you're saying, what are the factors of -3 that add to -1? Well, -3 times +1 is -1. And +3 times 1 is 2. Not factorable. Oops, this should be -2 here. All right, so you can't factor it like this. So you have to use the quadratic formula. I probably shouldn't have assigned this one here for you. Quadratic formula instead on this to find your answers, and then you'd have to inverse those. We're not going to give you any of those on the test, so I think we're just going to stop there for now and we'll discuss it in class, but we're at about 8 minutes.